Hi, I'm Terry Young. You probably realize that in the Old Testament, Jonathan and David made a covenant, a blood covenant. But did you realize that later on, after Jonathan had died, David continued that covenant by being a blessing to his son? Let's look at our Bibles at 1 Samuel 18, verse 3. 1 Samuel 18, verse 3 says, "And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off his robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt." What did these guys do? They made a covenant with each other, an everlasting contract that each one would bring to their relationship their very best strengths. They made promises to each other, and those promises were to be kept for their lifetime and for the generations to come. It was a contract, a very solemn contract between two families, in this case, Jonathan and David. Now, as you probably realize, later on, Jonathan died in battle. His father, King Saul, also died, and David became king of Israel. At that time, David began to say to himself and to others, "Wow, look at this. I live in such a great place. I'm the king. I have so many things to offer, and I want to show my kindness. Is there anybody left in Jonathan's family that I can bless?" Let's look at our Bibles at 2 Samuel chapter 9. 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 3. The king asked this, "Is there no one still left in the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" I like that. Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba's answer, "He is in Lo-debar." So King David had him brought from Lo-debar. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan and son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. Well, I think that would be what you would do if a king had invited you to his place. And David said, "Mephibosheth, your servant," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. Not because of anything you have done, Mephibosheth, but because of your father Jonathan, I'm going to show you kindness." Look what else he said. "I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul." Saul was king. "And you will always eat at my table." Now, what a blessing. Here is this man who has no use of his legs, who is living off in some land that is not all of his, and he is brought to the palace for the very purpose of receiving a blessing that was never promised to him, but that was a blessing that came from a covenant made with his father Jonathan, who is now dead. And Mephibosheth had a choice to make. He had a choice. Do I receive what is being offered to me here, or can I just have a cold, hard heart and just refuse anything that is being offered? And he had that choice. David, now what is David's motivation here? David's idea is that if I will maintain the covenant that I made with Jonathan, with God as the third party of that covenant, then I will continue to have blessings being poured out upon me because I am keeping the promise I made with Jonathan. And Mephibosheth didn't have to do anything. All he had to do was receive. All he had to do was just sit there and receive all that was being offered to him. I like to think of it this way too. If Mephibosheth and David lived under the covenant that you and I have today, he also would have and could have been healed. That's amazing to think about, because our relationship with Jesus is if healing is provided in the covenant blessings that we have with our God through and in him, Jesus, who paid the price for our healing. And so what decision did Mephibosheth make? He chose the right thing. He chose to stay and receive the blessings that David was offering to him. Now, I can imagine Mephibosheth sitting at the king's table. Here he is. He has access to the best food, the best medicine, the best entertainment. He is in the top rung of his society. And what did he do to get there? He did absolutely nothing, except that David had made a promise to his father, Jonathan, and David was choosing to keep that promise. Mephibosheth did nothing except just receive that blessing that was poured upon him. And I kind of like to imagine that if Mephibosheth is sitting at that table and he's looking over at King David and he looks down and maybe he sees a scar in his hand, because David and Jonathan had made a blood covenant together. And maybe he remembers as a child, 4 and 5 years old, seeing that same scar on his father Jonathan's hand. And it was a reminder. It was a reminder of what was provided to him because of this covenant. Now, when we have communion each month or each week in your church or at home, what is that for? It's for us to remember what Christ did for us when he shed his blood for us. We remember the blood represents, the wine represents the blood that Jesus spilled. The bread represents the flesh that was torn upon Jesus' back for our healing. And what do? We remember. And we sit and we think and we thank God for what he has provided for us in this covenant relationship we have through Jesus Christ. It's what we do. We receive what God has already provided to us because we remember everything that he did. Remember, God loved us before we ever loved him. And what do? We receive all that he has provided in that covenant. Hi, if you enjoyed this teaching, hit the subscribe button. If you'd like to be updated every time we upload a new video, then please hit the bell icon to receive notifications. Check out our website and check us out also on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching.